So here we are in part 2 of supporting communication and oral language skills in young children. And we're going to look at what is a language-rich classroom. Language-rich classrooms include several quality elements: exposure, deliberateness, recurrence, high-quality input, and adult responsiveness. Here's what these mean. Exposure means that children experience high-quality linguistic input both passively and actively within the classroom. They are exposed to language throughout the day in diverse contexts and interactions. So you can think about that in terms of your own classroom. When can we expose kids to language? Well, really any time they're with us, right? As long as we make sure we slow down and be present enough that we can use any opportunity as a teachable moment for oral language development. That can be at drop-off time, it can be at transitions, it can be during meals, it can be during independently chosen centers, it can be during small group, it can be during large group. We can look at any element of our schedule and intentionally begin to provide some of the exposure that children need to really develop oral language skills. So some of these exposures, it's important to note, the child might not be an active participant. They might be passively observing the language that's used around them. They might be hearing adults talk. They might be seeing some language labeled in the environment. They might be hearing each other talk. They don't need to overtly produce or imitate language to acquire key language. And we know because of the development of language that young children, they know more language than they can express at any given time in their development. So even though a 1-year-old isn't speaking yet or is just beginning to speak with a few words, we know that they understand a lot of what we're saying to them. And so that's really important when you're working with infants and toddlers, to make sure that you are not using language that can affect them negatively. I hear sad stories sometimes about infant toddler teachers who are holding an infant on their hip and really talking about these children as if they were not people, and as if they were trying to really shameful language about how the child is, not grown up enough or not able to handle certain things. So it's really important that we model kind of language we want socially too, for kids to start to develop a sense of self-esteem and self-talk about the language they're using in their head about themselves, as well as what they're talking about for other things. So this is broader than just school readiness here. We're really talking about the whole child when we're talking about oral language development. It's important to know that children begin to use more expressive language or begin to speak more when they interact with others. So we need to expose them to this. I used an image here of a dramatic play area because dramatic play is a very, very important place for children to get exposed to language. And sometimes we teachers need to get into their play with the children to model for them some of that, whether it's just the vocabulary of the objects you're including in there, or whether you've changed your whole dramatic play area into an area that children can act out a storybook that you've been reading. That really can enhance the vocabulary that may be unfamiliar to them, because they're going to start using the vocabulary from the book as they dramatically reenact the story. I've done that a number of times with the Three Bears or Where the Wild Things Are in preschool classrooms, and it's amazing to hear them start to apply that. And as soon as children start applying vocabulary in new contexts, whether that's play or whether that's real life, that's when it starts to stick. So we want to make sure we expose children to that. Another part of exposure is also about modeling effective language, pairing unfamiliar words with new words. We're going to talk about a lot of these strategies later. Deliberateness means that the adults in the classroom are intentional with the language you use. So again, this is more about what I was just talking about. You're being very careful about the literature that you choose in the classroom to read, that you're targeting specific vocabulary, grammatical constructions, meanings, and context in the books that you read. That you are modeling effective and appropriate grammar with children while you're speaking to them, that you're extending their vocabulary, and that you're providing, you're pairing concrete language that is very obvious with things that are more abstract to start to develop their thinking skills, just like you may have heard about as we talk about supporting those thinking skills in children. We also invite children to use language deliberately in which questions we ask, when we ask them, what we want to elicit from our questioning and from our conversations with children. Are we asking them to predict, to summarize, to make some reasoning about something? Are we investigating with children using oral language? High quality input. This is all about adult language that's characterized by diverse content, form, and use. And I'm going to talk about what these mean here. So content consists of the words that are used and the concepts that are expressed. So children experience many different word types, including adjectives, nouns, verbs, prepositions, adverbs. They're exposed to different ways those important concepts are expressed. Like think about ideas of concepts that interrelate, like kinship. You can have brother, uncle, aunt, grandparents, things that are related like time, tomorrow, or yesterday. Or shelter might include vocabulary around a house, apartment, a tent, these different things, so that you're building conceptual knowledge through language. You can also expose them to different gradations of precision, like it's talking about old or stale or musty or moldy. You can talk about the different multiple meanings of words, like think about the different ways you might use the word run. It's not just to physically move your body faster. You might, drop language on them to organize certain concepts, like especially around dramatic play areas. If you set up a farm area in the dramatic play area, you're suddenly building a conceptual knowledge of what it means and what vocabulary you use on a farm, or a doctor's office. This conceptual knowledge you can also play with words, that build that kind of concepts, or diverse ways to express similar things, like that towel, or that white towel, or the towel that Brady has. Form, so that's concept. Form refers to the way the word structure and sentence structure are organized grammatically and phonologically. And phonologically means the sound of language, whereas grammatical constructions are the units of language and how they're arranged. So we're making sure we're using different types of constructions, like descriptions for nouns, the old dark house. We are using various verb constructions. Walks is walking, will walk, walked, and prepositional phrases like under the table. So they're hearing simple, complex, and compound different ways of organizing sentence, and how to link those ideas to real world meaning. So if you want to get a sticker, you need to come and get one. Or if you need a paintbrush, it's on the shelf. So children experience questions in different constructions too, and we're going to look at different types of constructions of questions and how we can ask in different ways to elicit different responses. So that's form. Use refers to the ways language is used in functional contexts to achieve social purposes. So functional language is, we need to, these are directions we might give them. We might ask them to label, to repeat, to answer, to request, to greet. We might initiate a topic. We might expose them to conversations that initiate the topic, but then maintain the topic and then summarize the topic. So we're really looking at initiating with adults and peers, take turns in conversations, negotiate for objects, pretend play, all of these things. So children's content form and use directly reflects their experience with language in the world around them. And so exposing them to diverse content, form, and use of language in these three areas is an important role that an early childhood educator can play. Now, you're not going to need to remember all of those examples of content, use, and form as you're doing your video capture assignments, but I do want you to kind of get an understanding of how our language is modeled for children, and that we need to attend to those different kinds of formats and diverse exposures to ensure that children are hearing language the way we want them to later be expressing it. That's high quality input. Recurrence refers to how often vocabulary or any of those structures of language are heard. So it's important to repeat in order for children to really learn. And if you think about how many times a kid can watch a movie, that's the same thing. We don't want to read a book, for example, one time and expect that they're going to apply the new vocabulary from that book to their life. We want to make sure that we've read it a couple of times and we've done different things with it to really get those new vocabularies or new grammatical structures more sticky in terms of learning. So some researchers found that children's use of new vocabulary words increased in a progressive manner from the first reading to the third one as they experienced new words over multiple readings, like I was telling you. In language-rich classrooms, like we're talking about, repetition is valued and an integral part of the classroom routine. Children receive multiple opportunities to experience the linguistic concepts in diverse contexts, and classroom experiences are organized to foster repetition. So again, identify which vocabulary words might be new in your read alouds, and use them in the context of the day-to-day of the classroom, or incorporate it as you model how to play in the dramatic play area. These are all important things. Adult responsiveness means that adults frequently and consistently respond to a child's communicative acts in a way that is sensitive to the child's developing competencies. High levels of responsiveness by teachers and parents, particularly when the adult responses focus on child-initiated topics, have been repeatedly associated with robust language gains by children. So when a child says to you, why this, why that, or when a child comes to you and says, look at this, and you need to be immediately responsive and model really good listening, because that's how those conversations begin, and that's how a child gets encouraged and validated in using oral language to express their thoughts, their feelings, their needs, and to begin thinking more deeply about concepts.